go ahead and get started, respecting everybody's time. There's Mr. Skrzynecki. Good morning, Mike. Good morning, everybody. We have an hour here and counting down on that. My name is Jeff Cunningham. I'm a partner here at Parker Poe, and I've assembled some good friends and experts in data security. So I'd like to invite them to introduce themselves, and then we can get started. For those of you who have attended, these panel discussions in the past, these are intended to be very interactive. So, we're gonna talk about what we think you might want to talk about until you ask questions, and then we will know what you want to talk about. So we'd rather answer your questions than operate on our own guesses. I'll start with Steve Britt to my right here and go around and let everybody introduce themselves. Steve?
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. Great to be here. Nice to meet all of you. I'm Steve Britt. I'm counsel at Parker Poe for cyber data privacy and technology. Heavy focus on data privacy. I hold the CIPPE and CIPM certifications on data privacy. Thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Good to be with you all. My name is Johnny Lee. I am a partner at Grant Thornton, where I lead the forensic technology practice, which, as the name implies, deals with the use of applied technology to forensic agendas. A lot of that is investigative in nature, a lot of ransomware and business email compromise and data breach work. Good to be with you all.
Alan Lumpkin, Sterling Seacrest Pritchard. I run our technology and cyber practice group. Little background on me, I got into cyber insurance about 15 years ago before anybody knew anything about cyber insurance. And since that time, have recently just got out of a class at Carnegie Mellon where I earned a designation CCIC. I was one of 45 brokers across the world invited to take part in this class. So good to be with you this morning. Looking forward to sharing some information about the insurance side of things.
Hi, my name is Al Tonju. I'm with Wyndham Bratton. We're a regional public accounting and advisory firm. I lead our cybersecurity practice. We're focused on helping companies prepare to address cyber risk.
I'm Patrick Kelly, founder, CTO of Critical Path Security. I'm a hacker at heart. Have some Apple vulnerabilities and others that have given me the luxury of being in Forbes and Fortune and some of those others. And I've enjoyed the last 20 years, 25 years of watching this industry grow out of a culture and into like an actual grown child. So,
all right. So, those of you who have attended these breakfast panel discussions in the past know that my style is not to have prepared remarks or PowerPoints, but instead to have more of a conversation. And I've assembled some experts who have an intersecting Venn diagram center of data security. So we're going to talk about that today instead of everybody's favorite muffin recipe, which is later scheduled
next week.
Late scheduled later.
I want to tune in for that.
Yeah. So before cameras turned on, Patrick, you were talking about some of the breaches that made the news over the holiday weekend. Kick us off there. Tell us, update everybody that may or may not have heard about some of those things to give us some context.
Well, we're seeing ransomware breaches take a significant turn, especially when I was looking and engaging in things in 2019. We've moved to ransomware as a service. It's kind of this cross between McDonald's and the mafia now, which is, anyone can buy a franchise for a few $1,000s, and I mean, you can go and use pre-built ransomware with a supply line and a portal for people to support the victims, and then you can go out and take down companies like Colonial Pipeline. And it's starting to become a little more aggressive as we see this convergence of data leaked from this massive shift into cloud-based technologies, and that data being dumped and being used to go after the customers and those companies that move the data out there. So credential reuse against brand new launch remote desktop servers and LogMeIn and TeamViewer have led to this giant groundswell and explosion of companies are being completely upended. And as the ransomware has adapted to effectively when we went from 5% remote workforce and 95% remote workforce, we turned our corporate networks inside out like a sock. So there's not enough bandwidth, not enough VPNs, not enough resources, can't get to FA because we can't see people, so connect all the important stuff to the internet, which led to 1.4 million valid remote desktop credentials being dumped to the internet almost overnight. And of course, about 4 or 5 days, Colonial being one of those. So we moved away from having to burn O-days, which those that don't know O-days, these are vulnerabilities that you don't have patches, you don't have remediation for, to being able to go through a list of companies, choose the one you want to go after or the third-party vendor, go after the vendor and then traverse into it. And the world has changed. And the game now is fatigue the teams, launch the attacks on holiday weekends, launch them on Friday nights when no one's around. And I think the thing that most companies or most of the attendees and those listening in today and to the recording later understand is that nothing about ransomware is happenstance. Everything down to what the ransom is set up, to the data that they take. It is all very, very carefully calculated.
Let me ask for those who might not know. Okay, that's all very valuable information. What if I don't know what a ransomware attack is? How about getting really fundamental? These are, you are all experts. Not everybody is. So, help us lay a common lingo of, what is a ransomware attack? We certainly read about those, but what happens in a ransomware attack? And I'll throw that out for the group.
Well, at the most basic level, it's malicious software installed on a network that does one thing exceptionally well. It encrypts the systems that are running your business. And then the malicious actor who installed it and deployed it asks for a ransom in order to decrypt the systems that software has encrypted. And as Patrick was saying, these things are not happenstance, right? These are market evolutions. So 18 months ago, it was not at all common to have anything other than encrypted systems and a disrupted operating state, right? Where if you had valid backups that were not likewise encrypted and
right,
you could restore from those backups, your bad day was over. But like the sophistication and commoditization that Patrick was referring to, the market actors evolve. So now I don't need to have any technological wherewithal to ruin your day. I just need to know where to shop for them, right? And now there's a second lever that's applied, which is during the encryption, there's also a simultaneous exfiltration of data from the compromised network. And those data are then a second lever to apply. So let's say you have good hygiene, you are able to restore operations from your backup and get back to business. But now there's this second leverage point, which is unless you pay the ransom, whether you can restore from backups or not, we will publish these data. And that may be very embarrassing. It may be intellectual property, it may be private information, it may be health data, to which they've added a third level, which is now they will look inside those exfiltrated data and start contacting the individuals and businesses that are involved in those data and reach out directly to them and say, we got this information from you, from this company, and we would encourage you to call this company and implore them to pay the ransom. Otherwise, your information is going to be published. And now there's even a fourth evolution to that, which is a distributed denial of service, which is basically launching so much traffic at any internet-facing site that organization runs that even if you are back online from trusted backups, you can't communicate with the internet because all of this fraudulent traffic is. So these are market phenomena that we see in every industry going back to the dawn of time, right? You get a product to a particular level of sophistication and it becomes commoditized. And when it becomes commoditized, it can be consumed by a much larger audience. And that's where we are right now. And these people operate in jurisdictions that are largely untouchable. We have various, and this is not a comment on the current administration before we get mail, This has persisted for 3 or 4, administrations. There is no foreign policy to deal with this. There's a lot of saber rattling. There's a lot of naming and shaming. There is some effective prosecutions that are bringing some of these people to justice. But on the scale that this is happening, it's 20 or 30% of these things actually get pursued to the point of bringing a criminal case to trial.
Well, you have to remember, right, that even the attacks, the timeline is fundamentally different. Like most of the attacks, a group gets in there, they spend a whole week. The first thing they go after is the financial data and the insurance policy because they don't even know that they want to deal with you yet. So what's your P&Ls? What did you pay out last year? And what's your cyber insurance policy? And if we want $1 million, but the insurance company will only pay $500,000, is there enough money in the war chest to pay the other $500,000? And then when you go to negotiate for a lower ransom, they use your own financials against you. And before they ever even bother moving the data off the network, they're reviewing your financials and your insurance policy to figure out if they even want to deal with you. And here's the kicker. If they don't, it goes right back up on the self-serve portal that another group can go and just buy the access and go after the lower bounty. So we're trading company access and their ransomware payments like baseball cards. It's totally different. And if you're a city, like the ransom is your confidential informants and your undercover officers. So effectively, we have moved to the mafia side of it, which is great. You can pay the ransom or we will leak this information and have your people killed. Choice up to you.
So it's interesting how you describe that. There's a lot of professionalism that's gone into it. And what we've traditionally thought about when we think of a hacker, it's kind of like the guy in his boxer shorts in the garage, in his basement. That's so far from the truth today. These, what we call ransomware gangs, they really become Fortune 1000 businesses. And they're running them like a business.
I mean, we're supplementing the gross domestic product of countries that have financial sanctions against them. Like if you have a financial sanction and you can't sell your product on the open market, you can just go get that's exaggeration, but you can get billions of dollars through cryptocurrency. So, I mean, so be it. Leverage all you want. We'll just do this other way and we'll drive Lamborghinis around, the outskirts of Russia. We're cool with it. It's fine.
On Al's point, we're in the midst of a ransomware and there's a negotiator now that's negotiating with the threat actor. And in determining who is the threat actor, they said, no, it's important that we identify who it is through the nature of the malware. And it's really better that it be one of the known Babook or some of the known, because they have a reputation to uphold that their decryption key will work. So now you're saying, well, gosh, I hope it's a bad guy that we know, because then maybe we can trust them. It's upside down.
Well, there's no honor among thieves anymore. I mean, it's used to was a business that was run. We get in, we hold you for ransom, we give you the keys, you unlock it, and we move on to the next company. That's not the case anymore. And ransomware as a service has become huge, and it will continue to wreak havoc on organizations as we move forward.
Well, I mean, nobility extends only as far as acceptability, right?
Yeah. Well, it's all grounded in reputational harm, right? To your point, right? If they're not preserving their own reputation, then they don't have the wherewithal to follow through on the next one. And I think that's that commoditization aspect, right? We're not going to see this interrupted until there's a change in the prosecution landscape, a change in the foreign policy landscape. And so you see these, and let's be candid about this level of professionalism, right? These are people running 24/7 help desks with polyglots, right? Because they don't know the nationality of the affected systems until the victim reaches out to them. So they speak several languages. They're running 3 8-hour shifts. Imagine trying to explain, I mean, I don't know, we have some technical people on the panel, and I'm sure we're all by proxy tech support for our family members, right? Imagine trying to explain how to procure Bitcoin to your grandmother. That's what these people do. That's how professional the help desks have gotten. I mean, it's pretty breathtaking.
It is. I mean, and negotiation part of it, that's the most uneasy part of this whole thing. Like when you get to the negotiators of what we're going to pay, that's where it gets really sticky. Because, we need to figure out who this group is. Okay, well, that's about 15 minutes. And then you have your negotiator on this side that, you know, gets a commission, or they get at least some sort of transaction fee, right, by conversing and negotiating with the other side of the fence. And for those that haven't been through one of these before, it's really cozy. Like, you go do your forensic report and you pull out the logs of the communications back and forth, and they know when their kids are going to have a soccer meet. But we're not really sure what country that they're in. We think, you know exactly what country they're in. You speak to these people every other day. You're negotiating $1 million payouts together. You know their kids' names. The only reason that this is going on is because there isn't anyone actually prosecuting, paying out, and negotiating these ransoms. And I'm not trying to hate on the insurance company, but we did more or less validate a product here. Like, if the company doesn't have the money, the insurance company will pony up so that they don't have to pay the larger fee. So now you have a secondary means of getting paid out.
I might be getting a little political here.
It's about time.
But is what we're talking, is this really becoming a public policy decision? We look at the executive order that came out earlier this year, kind of mandating cybersecurity standards at the federal government level and with the contractors. But are we taking the wrong approach from a policy standpoint of how we're trying to improve cybersecurity? Are we looking at the wrong side?
The question though is can we? I mean, because we're trying to apply traditional strategies of conventional warfare to something that is a great equalizer of all borders. Like, if you've got a really good cybersecurity team that's great at, you know, eliciting, you know, kinetic responses, like look at, you know, it's pop right off the top of my head, but Natanz and those sorts of things. But if you can remote in and shut down a power grid because you have 12 of the smartest people on the planet, or maybe 12 of the second smartest people on the planet, how do you want to, like, you're pretty much either shutting down the energy grid or you're all out war, because sanctions don't work because you're getting paid for Bitcoin.
Well, the public policy, I mean, you make a good point. You know, the Treasury Office of Foreign Asset Control. So they've said now, if you make a payment to a ransom to a known terrorist group, you're subject to penalties. And I'm told that has had an effect. I think Australia has passed, and people are considering a statute that would say it's against the law to pay ransomware. That's a very difficult place to put your companies.
Let's talk about that. To pay or not to pay? That's the million, or at this point, multi-million-dollar question. And you as an organization need to determine pretty quickly what information has been exfiltrated, how long could you be down, how much money are you losing per hour? And then you need to get the forensics team, your breach coach, and your internal team together and figure out, do I pay this? Or do I risk my company potentially going under? One of the claims that I was involved in was ransomware. It was a $150,000 ransom, okay? I was on the phone with the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the breach coach, forensics team, the internal team, and the PR firm. All of us on a call together, all right? Everybody's in one corner saying, we don't need to pay it. And keep in mind, law enforcement will always tell you never to pay. And there's good reason for that, some of which is now law, or becoming policy. But you need to know pretty quickly whether or not that's going to disrupt your business or potentially put you out of business. This $150,000 ransom turned into a $10+ million claim, and this company was this close to going under. So I was on the side of, guys, we need to pay, and these are the reasons we need to pay. And they all went the other way. Right, wrong, or indifferent, it was a decision that was made.
In the business owner side of me, has a true struggle with this, because, you know, part of me wants to sit on my cybersecurity high horse and say, well, don't pay it. But the employee, or the founder, the employer, the guy that has to take care of my people, my staff, my leaders, knows that if I have to pay $150,000 or send my staff home and to their families, I'm going to write that check. I'm not going to write it twice. But that's a really, really hard question, because what we want to say, it's just not. You have to have a plan.
Yes.
And I think I say you don't want to pay it twice.
Yes.
But,
This is Bruce speaking. How can I help you?
Zahir, you have a question? I think he answered his phone. Okay, carry on.
You don't want to have it twice. But what's one of the biggest indicators of that you're going to be breached is that you've already been breached once.
Yes.
And so once you pay, they know you'll pay again. And we're seeing more ransomware payment requests already at the insurance policy limits.
Yep.
They know
Yes.
what you can afford to pay.
Well,
And that's the interesting part that's starting to happen in my industry is I think that we will begin to see insurance companies put limitations or exclusions into the policy that if they can find out, the forensics teams find out that your policy has been looked at by these bad actors, that they will either exclude coverage or you will be sharing in that loss up to 50% or some type of co-insurance penalty in the program.
Well, I'd love your take on this because I think we're already there. I've seen a lot of policies that have a prima facie, straight-faced argument for exclusions or denials of claims, and yet they pay. And I have attributed that for the last year or so to the rush to market, to the ability to get market share as an underwriter, right, as a carrier. But there's a math problem here that's not trivial.
Yep.
And I'm wondering where you think, get your tea leaves out, where you think we are chronologically from that tipping point, because it's not sustainable. And we have a lot of carriers today that could very easily deny a claim because of a misrepresentation on the application or, faulty controls or negligence on behalf of the executives or the IT shop. And yet the claims are paid. And because they don't want the negative press of being the carrier who didn't pay on a cyber policy.
So roughly 18 plus months ago, it was a race to the bottom for the insurance companies. Let me see how many policies I can write for the cheapest amount of premium. I mean, it was every time you went out for renewal, you were bringing in 10, 20% increase.
Off or
Effective,
or less code.
Yeah, increase because they put, I guess, 60, right?
effective
How much was that?
7/1 of this year.
Claudio, do you have a question?
Because yesterday was 65, I guess, something like that, so.
And that was when I entered the room when we arrived.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was like
Very
I mean,
cold.
what's it was so cold. It was
Hey,
freezing.
Claudia, do you have a question?
Greg's got one.
Effective July 1st of this year, you got a question?
Greg, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm not sure if this is going to be the focus of the conversation, but I'm listening to all this, obviously rather scary sounding. So are there going to be any comments on how one may prevent these sorts of incursions? And I'm not really clear on what kind of systems are prone to this. Are they Windows systems or Unix systems, or how exactly are they getting in, and which ones, what type of systems are susceptible to these sorts of attacks? Because we are an all Mac-based operation, so I've usually just sort of put this type of thing out of my mind. Oh, Macs aren't really affected by this, but obviously I need to look into it to make sure. But I thought I would just ask the question: what kind of systems are being attacked, and are there any approaches to avoiding this sort of incursion?
Yeah, so the preponderance of systems that are attacked are Windows systems, but that's simply a function of the market adoption of Windows deployments, right? Linux systems are not inured to this. Mac systems are not immune to this. It's universally awful, right? But to your related question about how do you prevent this?
Bad. I mean, looks like I have it checked into.
This is a good Faruqi. Hello.
Yesterday I saw on the news on TV.
Mhm.
I don't know, there was like the weather channel or any
So-
news
Yeah,
channel,
no.
local one.
Mhm.
And then there was this man
Claudio,
running
Can
down.
I ask folks to mute their mics if they're not asking a question?
Will be closed tomorrow. This
Yeah,
will be
long
closed.
is fine.
This will be closed. So a
There
lot
was some
of
correction,
companies already
Right,
decided
I'm gonna send them an email.
offices or
Yeah.
shops or
Yeah.
whatever
Whatever it might be.
Bear with us, Greg.
Do you live in PCHS?
Wonder if Zahir is talking to Claudia.
Yeah, he might be.
Similar.
I think.
Right.
I think they're having a conversation.
Yeah, but listen.
Yeah.
That might be a little rude if I break away. So let's do
I think there's a way to mute it from your end. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we're going to try that.
We hope so.
So Greg, to your broader question about is this all bad news or is there hope here? I despite what I see on a regular basis, am optimistic, right? There are some trends that are worth sort of keying into here. And I think the major theme that this ties back to is to develop some quantum of muscle memory here, right? To exercise good judgment and have some written policies that you practice so that when you do have an event, you at least have some institutional memory to bring to bear on this. You have the good retainer agreements that you need for your legal counsel and your forensics firms. The in-house team knows from which script they're going to read, who writes the script, who approves the script, who speaks on behalf of the company. Your insurance company is in the mix and they're apprised and your coverages are clear. These are things to practice before the bad day because nothing quite accentuates personalities and disconnects like a crisis. And the way to minimize that, you can never truly get rid of it, but the way to minimize that is to practice it and to have some very proactive approach to that. Because there is, to your first question, there is no protection, there is no immunity based on your footprint. And I think Patrick's point earlier, which is that the perimeter for most corporate environments has disappeared with the work from home regime.
Right.
And so all of the traditional insulations that you might have obtained from a firewall or, your proxy servers and things like that, those are no longer bankable controls. So you need to pivot to something more like an endpoint protection regime. And more importantly, you need to act on the things those endpoint agents are reflecting to you, reporting to you, alerting to you. And that's the different environment that we're in today.
2.5 years ago or so, pre-pandemic, Johnny and I did a panel similar to this one, and our focus was on data security in an Internet of Things environment. And we were talking about all of the potential entry points that are scattered around everywhere, and how everything could be a vulnerable entry point. Anybody that has a Raspberry Pi that they can plug in and manipulate. And we were talking about kind of, physical things. And now we're in a very different environment, and we're not talking about that right now. I think that probably will come back once we've, quelled the dragon that we're presently dealing with. But it is a different environment. So tell us about, what do you mean when you say the endpoint?
So this is your laptops, your workstations, your desktops. So if those are now the most vulnerable assets in terms of the initial compromise, right? If this is the conduit for the bad actors to get into your environment, those have to be secured. Those have to be locked down. They can't just be sort of promiscuously talking through the internet. You can't be exposing these services in the way that you would something that has layers of controls or defense behind that. And that's the difference between the traditional corporate regime and the work from home regime, is that the perimeter, we've been talking about this for 20 years, right? 25 years, the defense in depth concept. And it used to be sufficient to build your castle walls high and your moat wide and to have a strong gate at the front. But now people are piggybacking on the king's men as they walk and come to and fro inside the courtyard. So there's a real difference here between how you're able to secure a traditional environment and giving everyone a laptop that they take home and communicate freely with the internet, where they're using their personal email and clicking on God knows what, opening God knows what. At the same time, they have access to your corporate assets from that same workstation or endpoint. So there's an industry now that exists to secure those endpoints that has been around for a while, but we're past the point of antivirus being the mandatory minimum. Now we need something very intelligent sitting on those endpoints and looking at suspicious behavior, or what we geeks call heuristics, and acting, sometimes intervening automatically and rapidly when they see something that is an indicator of compromise or a potential vulnerability in a way that the operating system or the other applications on that endpoint can't do. So you have an agent, literally, it's a great word for the term. You have an agent standing watch on the endpoint, and based on how it's tuned and configured, it can either simply report back all of the things that are happening on that endpoint, or it can do that and intervene to shut things down, like connections that shouldn't be happening, communications that shouldn't be occurring, et cetera. And that's the real difference to me architecturally between the old and the new, pre and post pandemic.
So, I mean,
When you say agent, do you mean an actual person or some type of
Software, an application. Yeah.
So one of the things, if I could kind of add a wrapper to what we've been touching on here,
yeah,
we're talking about having a plan. You know, in life and business, you know, failure to plan is planning to fail. And so when it comes to cybersecurity and business operations, what we're seeing today is the convergence. They're merging together. You can no longer provide business services and then think cybersecurity, come and secure us. You have to think about what's our business service? How are we going to secure it? What's our plan to provide that service in a secure and protected manner? How are we going to manage it? How are we going to understand how we're doing? And then how are we going to adjust and adapt to the next threat? Because what we're seeing today with ransomware and supply chain attacks is not going to be the last type of vulnerability or threat we face. There's new ones that are going to be coming.
so you need to have a plan, but we're missing, I feel like we're missing some very easy things, Greg, that you can do.
Yep.
Get a password manager so that you're not reusing the same credentials. Put two-factor authentication on every single account you possibly can. You're already doing it more than likely on bank accounts. You're probably doing it to get into QuickBooks or whatever, you know, planner that you're using. Apply two-factor authentication everywhere that you can. And if you can't put two-factor authentication on it, ask if you should have it. Because when I get called and when my team is called to come and break into your companies so we can point out the things that you need to fix, the first thing we do is we roll through all the credentials that have been dumped. And considering most breaches last 260 days, and then there's about 30 to 45 days before they're ever going to let you know anything about it, you have to assume your credentials have already been breached for at least a year. So Password Protector is going to make sure you're not reusing them. So if Edward Jones gets popped, it's not going to go pop Fidelity. Or if you're not, it's going to tell you if you're using the same password here that you're using at the office. And then get two-factor auth on that sucker. So, I mean, agents are great, but agents are isolated. Like we're still trying to solve a thing. And as much as we love to talk about AI and ML, we're still building it around signatures, and signatures are still reactive. But I go into companies all the time, and you know, either an instant response or a pen test, and I just say, man, like if you just put two-factor on that VPN connection, if you just put two-factor on Office 365, and they're all here and they're all baked in, you just have to turn it on, and it comes with a free app, and you don't have to pay for it. And instead of me giving you criticals and highs, or instead of us talking about paying $1 million ransom, I would either not be here or the remediation would take a week to go through a bunch of medium and lows. I'm just going to tell you, I mean, as a 27-year hacker that's paid to break into networks for a living, two-factor and a password manager stops the majority of the attacks. And just get the stuff off the edge of the network. And I'm just please just do those things.
So let me add a little bit. Patrick and Johnny have both touched on two basic things that really need to be in place. And I'm going to add three more. Multi-factor authentication right now. If you don't have it in place, 80 to 85% of the insurance carriers not provide terms and conditions. And that number is only going to grow as we continue to move forward. Make sure that you are segmenting your backups, and make sure that you are segmenting the information within your network that your employees have access to. All right, your employees are the weakest link in your security chain. So if you're providing them access to information they do not need, and the bad actors get in, you've already opened up the treasure trove or the critical assets of your organization that these guys can successfully trade and have a field day with you. Employee education, I just mentioned employees are the weakest link in your security chain. Make sure that you are educating them around what the most common threats are, how to protect themselves. They're your first line of defense. All right, so educating them and making sure that they're aware and know what they're doing is going to protect your organization. There's a lot of companies out there that can do that now. And insurance companies even partner with third parties for a discounted rate to help educate your employees. Johnny touched on EDR. That's artificial intelligence on your endpoints. That's endpoint detection and response. That's another area that is easy to implement that can protect your network 24/7. These bad actors, they don't have any off time. They're coming after you 24 hours a day. And the last thing, and which is becoming more and more of an issue with you, if you look at the Kaseya incident as well as SolarWinds, is make sure your supply chain third-party risk, know what they have access to within your network, as they are using them as a gateway to get into your organizations. So Greg, those 5 things are really basic that if you don't have in place, that your organization needs to and can adopt pretty quickly to protect your organization.
Alan, 100%, dude. I mean, when the Kaseya breach hit, I've been waiting on that one.
Yeah.
You know, about three or 4 months prior when SolarWinds was popped. I went on LinkedIn and I went on Twitter, and I know it's terrible, but anyway, they are what they are. And I'm like, you know, the next thing that's going to be hit is going to be managed IT companies, because they have an agent on everything. And IT folks are just terrible at security. I mean, because we're just kind of fatigued on it. So yeah, 100%, man, 100%.
Well, managed service providers right now, insurance companies are running from. They want no part of them because they are aggregators. They have their tentacles in thousands of different organizations, and they have easy access. Their job is to keep your company going so you can continue to drive revenue to your bottom line and to keep everybody happy internally. Because if the sales guy can get to the information he needs to make a sale, the IT guy is getting a call.
The managed IT companies, and I'm going to throw fire, and I'm going to hear about this later, but it is what it is. The managed IT companies are going to be the largest weaponized force because they're getting into cybersecurity without knowing what the hell they're talking about. And they don't understand, because they actually haven't done this for longer than one McAfee conference they went to that turned them into an expert, to understand that these are 2 entirely competing missions. Managed IT is uptime, and it's also based on the all you can eat, which means to be profitable, I have to spend the least amount of time as possible with my customers, and the customers being on this phone call. And I have to have the cheapest resource that I can get to do it. Uptime and making sure everything's stable and you don't touch it so that you don't have to pay anyone is entirely different than risk reduction.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity is just another really great, cool, matrixy word to say risk management. That's what we're here to do. Risk management is not uptime. And managed IT companies that are doing cybersecurity because it's a new hotness, they scare the hell out of me. Because they go and grab Kaseya or ConnectWise or whatever their vendor branded up in a nice, pretty package. They go to a company and they lead cybersecurity initiatives by line item, which means if they can't sell it on a line item, it's not important enough to mention to the customer. And if they don't know how to do it, they're not going to put it on a line item and they're not going to sell it. So if you look at a corporate environment, you have the MIS group and you have the cybersecurity group. MIS reports to operations, cybersecurity reports to the CFO. And that is not an accident. There's a separation of duties so that you don't have any collusion, you're not grading your own homework. And when I look at managed IT companies that were fixing printers a year ago, and now they're doing this thing, and now they're going to do cyber, I'm going, you still ship multifunctional printers with defaults. You can't get the basics right.
Yeah.
But you're going to go to a company that's dealing with 200,000 people's personal, most sensitive information and tell them what to do. And it's horrifying.
So to crib from Alan's turn of phrase before, maybe Greg, because you asked the question, right? If we were to put a wrapper around all of this, the axiom used to be that which you cannot prevent, you need to at least detect, right? That was sort of the cybersecurity mantra, right? If we can't do multi-factor authentication or separated passwords so that if one password is compromised, at least they can't get into all systems. If those very strong, compelling preventive controls aren't in place, they should be, right? And the detective controls, which are the things that, you know, literally detect after the fact, those are equally important, assuming someone looks at what the detective controls are doing. And I would add to this a third sort of axiom, right? That which you can't prevent, you must detect, and that which you can neither prevent nor detect, you should insure for. But to Alan's earlier point, the way that that works is that the carrier goes the other direction. They're going to take a hard look at what your preventive controls are, what your detective controls are, and then what the residual risk is, and then either, you know, deny the application or give you a rated product. And so whether you're doing this for insurance to secure a product, or whether you're doing this for proper hygiene, not compliance. I don't want to conflate security and compliance. They're not at all the same animal. But whether you're doing it for security or insurance, the progression ought to be the same. You kill the most birds with preventive controls. So start with those. Do those very basic things. There will be residual risk after that, because to Alan's point, your people are going to insure that. They're the weakest part of the equation. So establish all the detective controls you can afford and that you can reasonably monitor. And for whatever's left over, and there will be a residue there too, you should try and secure insurance for. So I hope that helped.
I have always, the world is a very complex place, and there's no way that any of us are going to know everything that we need to know. But there are proxies out there that I've always, steered people toward. And Alan would be an excellent proxy for knowing how to do a lot of stuff. Go to your insurance broker, go to your insurance carrier and say, what do I need to have in place to have the least amount of cost to pay you? What do I need to do to pay you the least amount of money? Because if I'm qualifying for the lowest premium possible, I'm only qualifying for that because I'm doing all the things that that you tell me I need to do to qualify for that, because you don't want to pay out on claims. So I don't need to know how to do everything. I just need to get a checklist from the guy who's ultimately going to write the check. That's maybe third best to actually knowing the stuff, but it's a complex place.
Well, I want to echo on that, and he's probably too modest to say this. I mean, I just met him, so I don't know how modest he is.
He's not modest at all. The swimsuit photos alone.
Thanks for that.
Wow. Wow, that escalated quickly.
So brokers are indispensable to this landscape. They truly are, and not just for product fit and purpose and placement. But when there's an incident, the brokers will get the attention of the carriers in ways that the policyholders simply don't have enough sway to do that, right? If you think about what a broker does, they write numerous products for a particular underwriter, and they get them placed in the market. And that influence matters. So if you have an incident and your carrier is dragging its heels or treading water or not responsive to you in some material way, the brokers have a real influence on that equation. So as a forensic responder, we have really come to rely on our broker relationships because we need to break through whatever bureaucratic impasse we happen to be in. It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens with a lot of the major carriers. And it's a real problem because it costs my clients time and money that they don't have because they're already in a crisis. So if you don't have a broker, go get one. They are really worth their weight in gold.
Well, for sure. And I don't know if this is still the case, but it used to be that they would say for carriers, I mean, some of my favorite brokers for clients said, I may have to put 4 or 5 different policies together to cover the actual risk of that. They have to know your risk as the applicant and help you put together an insurance plan that'll work.
And it's such a weird landscape. The products change every 6 months.
So the unnerving part about the cyber marketplace is that there is no uniformity whatsoever. You look at a property policy, a liability policy across the insurance industry, they're pretty much the same across carrier to carrier. Now, there may be some exclusions and differences, but with cyber policies, no carrier is the same. They all call it different. They all have different exclusions, limitations, everything. The only thing that's the same within a cyber policy is your third-party coverage. In the event that you are breached, personal private information is leaked, you are sued by those individuals, there is liability there to protect you. Or in the event that they use you as a island to get to the people you're doing business with, they suffer a breach. During the course of forensics, they find out you're the start of the breach, they will come back and sue you for the first and third-party costs. That's covered. Where it starts to change, and really effective 7/1 of this year when the reinsurance treaties came in place, is your first-party coverages. All right, we're talking about business interruption. We're talking about forensics costs. We're talking about contingent business interruption. How many people now rely upon the cloud or third-party software providers to perform their business? All right, those coverages now are being limited or going away. Extortion, in the event you're hit with ransomware. Now that is, a lot of carriers are putting in co-insurance. We're going to share in that loss up to 50%. In addition to that, if you use any type of, and these are the new ones that came in place. If you use any end-of-life software or firmware, now there's full exclusions in that in a lot of policies. In the event that, the co-insurance and prices are going up, guys. At the beginning of this year, the average increase in the cyber policy is about 25%. Now we're looking at minimum 50% up to 60% minimum. And that's because carriers have finally started to underwrite this. And if you don't have multi-factor authentication in place, as I mentioned earlier, 80 to 85% of carriers are walking away. And that number is going to go to 100% pretty timely.
I've also been surprised, just really quickly, on the topic of coverage, I've also been surprised how many business owners don't appreciate that lost profits are not covered in any way, not even tangentially. That seems to be a shock to them. Well, at least this downtime is covered by a product. Well, no, it really isn't. I've yet to see a product that
There's business.
except for a specific rider, right? Business interruption, yes. Lost profits, not so much.
But I think we're kind of hitting around it, and you've got to have someone like Alan that will sit down with you, like really sit down with you. Not kind of get on a phone call for an hour, because you can't understand someone's business and the risk and how to help them protect it in an hour. But you get someone like Alan to come in there and truly take the time to understand your business and to help you figure out what you need, and to know these questions that you need to ask so that you can get, because most coverage that we bump into at IR is either overfit or underfit. And it wasn't because and oddly enough, it's not because the company was price shopping. It's because they just didn't know. And an interesting bit that we're finding, which I thought, now it's obvious, which most things are, after you see them once, but we will do an instant response, and the law firms and everyone that's part of it will refuse the actual reports, so that there isn't anything that's discoverable. If they have to go back and get insurance, if they have to go back, there's nothing discoverable around this event, and that's how they're getting around, well, have you been breached before? Well, there's no report, there's no discovering evidence, there's a check paid for whatever we line item as. But you have to have someone come in to just help you understand, because it's brand new. Cyber's weird already. So yeah, having
And the data breach, we're not doing much data privacy, and we don't need to. This is too rich. But the notifications now, the regulators, when they come in to analyze the data breach, it becomes a full data protection compliance. So
Right.
These data privacy laws coming in place with fines and penalties, that risk is exponentially growing, and the litigation risk is one of the great ones. So
we're kind of waiting for that to actually go into court, though, so we can
Right.
understand what it is.
exactly.
Like there's statutes.
Yeah.
George has a statute, but like till it goes to court, what does it mean?
Well, you've also got a, an order of operations aspect on, on an incident report or an incident response. If a company hires you to go, do an investigation and then goes to talk to their lawyers, then your report is discoverable.
Right.
But if they go to the lawyers first and the lawyer hires you,
Right.
then that's attorney work product and may not be discoverable.
Well, it's presumptively privileged, but the case law coming out of Capital
Yeah.
One and other progeny, that's changing that
Yeah.
landscape. And I agree with you. 2 out of every 3 matters we work, we are not giving a written deliverable.
Right.
And that's remarkable. It used to be 100%.
No,
So-
they fight. They
So,
fight.
so this is the takeaway here is that this is a very complex, area.
Yeah.
It touches on, it touches on, not just the data itself. It's the business health. It's the legal landscape. It's every kind of exposure that you can imagine. And, it takes a village, so bring together your advisors, to get everybody in the same room on the same page. And going back to one of the first things that Johnny said is have a plan. Your plan should include, if this happens, here's who we call. Don't be scrambling, in the face of the fire for who you call. Know that in advance.
And please practice the plan. Don't let it gather dust on a shelf. Please practice it. Even if it's just virtual on the phone.
Please
Have your
don't
broker,
store it on the server.
have your forensics provider, have your lawyer, and then walk through a simulated hypothetical. It doesn't take but a few hours to get and do this in a crawl, walk, run fashion. Choose a plausible scenario that's likely to impact your company, right? Business email compromise, someone in AP clicks on the wrong link, or some vendor requests that you change their payment information, and you realize that you've wired money to the wrong place. What do you do now? Who do I call first? Who do I call second? Who needs to be on notice? Who needs to be on deck? What do we communicate to our in-house people? What do we communicate publicly, if anything? Those kind of simulation exercises develop that muscle memory to which I referred earlier. That becomes so crucial, right? The last thing you want to do is dust off your protocol when your hair's on fire, because no one's ever read that thing before. And if you haven't practiced it, you're
like tabletop
and
exercises are
choose advisors, choose consultants, choose brokers who will spend the time and invest the time to really understand your business, because your business is not a commodity. We started off by saying that the threats that we're facing now have been commoditized, that the ransomware that is now something that you can rent, and that has been commoditized, but your business is not. Your business is unique to you, and if your advisors are treating your business as a commodity, well, here's what you do, without even looking under the hood, then you're going to get a partial measure of security at best. So choose advisors that will actually understand who you are, what your business is like, and will decommoditize your risk preparation.
Yeah.
well said.
Yep. Yeah. All right, we're at 9:57. Any questions from the field? We've got some folks that are on camera, some folks that are off camera. I exhorted everybody to turn off their mics. Turn them back on if you have a question. Alan has a question. Go.
Yeah, just a comment. Great presentation, really good information, particularly in equating cybersecurity as being risk management. We have seen our group and our CPA firm, Smith and Howard, shift a lot of gears in the last couple of years, where we were doing a lot of preemptive stuff on employee education and so forth, to reacting to those people that didn't pay attention to it. And this time of year, most 1231 companies, as they're starting the budget cycle, we're heavily emphasizing throwing a lot of dollars at managing their cyber risk, and that can go a lot of different areas, but the employees being the weak link, we've seen that in 90% of the situations where companies had a problem. So we are eating our own dog food, and we're spending a lot of time educating and re-educating employees, and if those that don't comply, we're taking some of their access privileges away. We just can't afford the risk of cavalier employees.
Yeah, a couple points to that. I own a cybersecurity company, and I do not have access to everything in the company. I don't need it. And what I try to explain to people when I do training is that I'm not worried about what you're going to do with your account. I'm worried about what a threat actor is going to do with your account. And there's a striking difference between those things. So reduce the access down to what you have to have, and have a good data retention policy. Because you don't have to protect what you don't have, and you're barely going to have enough resources to protect what you do have. So any way that you can take things, just reduce that attack surface, get some of that data offline, control who has access to it. It's just risk management.
Okay, well, thanks everyone. That's about our time. I want to thank our panel for joining us for such an engaging conversation. And I think that everybody here is probably pretty findable. And I think that contact information was in the invitations and emails. So feel free to follow up with all of our panelists here if you have any questions or you need to engage their services, which is likely.
Please, I love answering questions and emails.
Yeah,
I really do, actually. And I don't think I've ever charged anyone to answer a question in an email. So find me for the most trivial or most complex things. I'm glad to help. And I want you to get it right.
Yeah, all true.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, I don't know how to sign this off, so I'm going to sit here and wait till it signs off on the Mac. I'm doing that from remote.